It has strong demand for illegal bushmeat that endangers animals and risks introduction of zoonotic disease. But Nigeria could be a conservation leader. With Lagos leading the way, Nigeria is updating its wildlife legislation. It's improving its wildlife law enforcement, and it's revolutionizing its public awareness. WildAid and its Nigerian partners are launching the largest ever conservation awareness program in Africa to drastically increase coverage of wildlife issues. Working with government agencies, working with the media, working with prominent Nigerian ambassadors
to report suspicious activity and wildlife crime,
to promote Nigeria's national parks, to promote wildlife law enforcement, to raise awareness of the dangers of illegal bushmeat, and to promote alternatives. Nigeria can go from crisis to becoming a leader in conservation.
So let's do the right thing.
Tell your families and friends to say no to illegal bushmeat.
Keep them wild.
Keep them wild.
Keep them wild. Keep us safe.
And keep us safe.
Information is power. Everyone wants power. So feel powerful with the NTA News mobile app, the one-stop information center. Real news at your fingertip. Be the first to report by uploading first-hand information on the YouReport link, and be the first to know by simply clicking on any of the links on the sidebar for headlines, domestic and foreign news, economy, security, politics, sports, and more. Stream live on your smartphone and tablets and stay connected. It's pretty easy. Simply download NTA News app from your Google Play Store and you're good to go. NTA News mobile app, your access to real-time information.
And there's the start. And
Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live and I'm Cyril Stober. Nigeria has experienced massive infrastructure development which have impacted different sectors of the economy. These are in road construction, aviation, rail and other forms of transportation and critical national assets. Tonight, NTA Tuesday Live We'll look at the efforts of the present administration in the completion of abandoned projects, new ones as well, and the huge investments in housing and human capital development. But before we go into that fully, Tuesday Live will also take a look at the extension of the cash swap deadline by President Muhammadu Buhari and matters arising. But let's get to see this report put together by our correspondent.
To fender was the in thing on the First Niger Bridge couple of years ago. Now the table has turned. Those frustrating hours spent on the bridge has railed into a smooth ride through the newly constructed Second Niger Bridge, with travelers savoring the moment.
This is my first time.
Okay, so what's your experience?
Yes, the road is quite okay. It's nice compared to the other one.
The other one, at least it is at the traffic we are facing.
Yes,
on the other
it is
side.
Bridge.
Yes. So what do you have to say to the government that did?
Yes, I will say thank you to the federal government.
And it's going to ease the stress of the traffic and everything. So at least it will be able to decongest that point.
The point.
Yeah.
Is it the first time you are?
Yeah. I'm coming from Benin. I'm going to Abuja State.
Okay, you're going to Abuja State. Yeah. So it makes it easier for you.
Easier and faster.
All right.
More interesting is the bridge's engineering genius. The mold it stands, joints and bed. Amazing is when the day gave way to night. As far as the Second Niger Bridge is concerned, the storm is over. Down south, however, another storm is rising. This storm is putting smiles on the faces of the descendants of King Jaja of Opobo. It was a project in its shells for more than 30 years, but the progressives gave it a lifeline.
The distance between policy and results requires a bridge, and we are building those bridges to the results.
Now it is close to completion, and the Minister of Works and Housing never took his eagle eyes away from the project, keeping contractors on their toes.
This is my fourth trip to come and observe how much progress the solution is making until we finish it. In a nutshell, therefore, whilst people are talking about the problems, this government is administering the solutions. And as we finish here, we will go to another place where we are providing solutions.
Linking the islands with the mainland puts for the first time the people of Boni and Bodo on a solid land, a departure from the long and tiring as well as risky water travel. In Abuja, Abdullahi Muhammad.
All right, that report sets the tone for our discussion on infrastructure development. Well, we did say to you at the start of this program that we'll touch a little bit on the extension of the period given for this new currency swap, and that will engage our attention immediately. Let me start off by introducing our guests. We'd like to welcome to this program Ajuri Ngelale, who's Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Ajuri, nice to have you. It's been a while. I haven't seen you around.
Truly a privilege to be with you, and it's good to be a part of this conversation.
All right, thank you. Let me also welcome to this program Ni Akishiju. He is a financial investment analyst. Thanks for joining us tonight.
A pleasure as always. A privilege to be here too.
Right. So you are the finance and investment man. So let's look at this whole business about the new Naira notes, the extension. It came after so many people had raised concerns about many Nigerians not being able to meet up. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if I want to look at it professionally, I wouldn't have supported an extension. We had a 90 days window, to have monies deposited. The swap was a contingency plan. given the fact that, in recognition of the fact that people in the rural communities, could not get their hands
through no fault of theirs.
Through no fault of theirs. That's why I'm saying, if I'm looking at it professionally, because you see, the Nigerian scenario, as it relates to the design, is not the usual change of currency. It is an application of economic theories and issues. And what I'm trying to say essentially is that the moment the central bank governor announced that more than 80% of our currency was outside the banking system, no central banker should be able to sleep aright from that moment onward. It's, to my mind, should be a declaration of a state of emergency, because what it means really is that you don't have any constituents in terms of financial constituents to supervise or to oversight, as a central banker. The major responsibility of a central banker is monetary policy, with intent at, of course, driving price stability. And what you do with your monetary policy is to determine the quantum of money in the economic system at any point in time. And that's why we talk about rate increase and, of course, rate reduction. When you want to increase people's access to money, you reduce rates, you have accommodative stance. When you want to you want to increase people's access, you reduce rates. If you want to reduce, you increase rates. Now, what are you increasing or what are you reducing when the money is not even within your purview? Okay. So as it is, we have that challenge. And secondly, there's also what you call velocity of money. Money, when it comes from the central bank, moves in a cyclical form. It goes from one hand to the other. And as it moves in transaction from one hand to the other, it's creating value. So the 1,000 naira that starts a strip from the central bank, for instance, gets to Mr. Cyril, at 1,000. If Mr. Cyril is transacting a business with Ajuri, and let's assume it's 100% returns business, you are buying Ajuri's handkerchief for 1,000 naira. You give him 1,000 naira, you have done a 1,000 naira transaction. You have created a 1,000 naira value on that 1,000 naira currency. When he's buying a 1,000 naira item from me, 100%, that 1,000 naira had created another 1,000 naira value. So you can imagine what it is when you have a billion naira somewhere under somebody's pillow. It means you have created a redundancy for that kind of money.
Okay. All right. So if we were to leave all that, the theory of all that, and then come to what concerns the man, the Nigerian, the citizen, and there's a change, currency has been redesigned, and the simple question every citizen would ask is, who should benefit from these policies? In fact, who are the beneficiaries of government's policies, whether it relates to the economy or anything else? Who are the beneficiaries? The people. So the second question is, if a policy in its implementation is hurtful to the people who should be the beneficiaries, isn't it just right to do what has been done?
His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari has been elected President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria twice on the strength of the understanding of Nigerians that this is a man who cares for their well-being. Above any other interest in the country, this is the pro-people defender of the masses. And I think in the action taken by Mr. President in directing the adjustment, the extension of the original deadline, he's proven once again that the fate and interests of the common man, whether in the rural communities or whether in the urban centers, is paramount to him. Now, he is one who when he directs for a policy to be approved and conducted, his expectation is that it will be conducted and implemented without a hitch. But he's also very pragmatic about the fact that when you have these kinds of large-scale operations that are nationwide, that scale across all 774 local governments, mistakes can be made. And so once those mistakes are clearly reported, you can trust Mr. President as a man of integrity and a man of responsibility would move swiftly to ensure that such hitches are resolved. And that's what we've seen over the past week. Let me say very quickly, Cyril, that it's one thing to tell Nigerians to take their old notes into the bank or to be able to swap through other mechanisms made available by the central bank. But we understand that it's equally essential to ensure that our people have access to these new Naira notes. And if we have widespread reports from the banks and from, of course, our citizens in the rural communities and urban centers of the country that they cannot cite and access these new Naira notes, then that means that there's obviously need to ensure that we hold accountable the institutions that are responsible for ensuring that those new notes are made available. Mr. President is of that opinion. He has extended the deadline, and I'm sure he, by ensuring that the EFCC and the ICPC are also involved in the currency swap operation, has multiple eyes to make sure that the right things are done moving forward.
All right. Let's come back to you. And this other aspect of it is, yes, this extension has been granted, but is there anything peculiar about Nigeria's situation? I mean, lots of people will say things like this happen in other parts of the world, but not nearly as chaotic as it is in this country. Is there anything peculiar here about the Nigerian situation?
For me, it's the realization that these are dependency on the virtuousness of private sector operators may be misplaced. The banking industry is populated by private sector operators. We have 90 days to implement this very important policy. And I say it's important because when you have 2.7 trillion of your national currency outside the economic space, it speaks even to the capacity of the banks to deliver on their mandate. Now, you have this policy that's going to correct that. I think it's the banks, the money deposit banks, that should drive the implementation in the first instance. And that would also translate to increasing their capacity, increasing their capacity electronically, ICT-wise and all that. Because I think what we are missing is the messaging, especially from the central bank policy and, of course, from the president. The messaging is that we are moving into a new realm of cashless policy. It's a new realm. So it is not about you take 100 million to a bank and you take 100 million back. Mm-hmm. It is first sucking up the excess money outside. Right. And then you are going to, transaction now will be driven digitally and electronically. Yes, there is a need, of course, to have supporting backup funds in lesser quantity, But yes, I feel disappointed that the banks, I'm not holding the central bank responsible for this. I feel that the banks have not done very well. I feel that before the policy took effect, you could approach an ATM and you get money drawn at any point in time. Why is it that this last 3-4 weeks that had become critical to the implementation of the policy, you could not do that?
I think very, very quickly, Cyril, just to add on to what he said, I think this is why Nigerians generally were actually quite excited. In fact, just this afternoon, I was having a conversation with a taxi cab driver, just randomly on the street side. I was engaging with him, and he was actually commending me, commending President Muhammadu Buhari for the policy in the first place, saying that the president has shown his commitment to cleaning up, the elections from these kinds of cash flows. The point here is that Nigerians accept and commend the policy itself. What they are concerned about is the implementation. And my brother has looked at, deposit money banks as being responsible, that perhaps private sector actors are not being virtuous and all of that. But we understand that the Central Bank of Nigeria has disciplinary powers over the deposit money banks in the country. And so there is a need to ensure that if the banks are not, for whatever reason, availing the new Naira notes to the Nigerian masses, that they are now wielding the big stick and issuing the sanctions that need to be issued. Those sanctions have not been issued. So we believe that there's still more that can be done to ensure that all actors involved in the situation are doing the right thing.
Right. While many Nigerians would not question the introduction of the policy for whatever reason, the reasons are clear. They've mopping up all that money outside the banking system. But the thing is, when you look out on the streets, the citizens, 50 or more, queued in front of one ATM. These are not the people who have hundreds of millions of naira at home.
That's right.
These are ordinary folks who need 10,000, 5,000 to do so many things on a daily basis, and they cannot access that.
That's right, and this is the problem we're discussing.
That's why you question what exactly are the deposit money banks doing. The CBN is not a retail bank. It cannot be responsible for dispensing these new notes. And over the last 3 months, the CBN had continuously, and I want to give the CBN the benefit of doubt, because it's the progenitor of the policy in the first instance. And of course, I believe that being the progenitor, it would have also created the circumstances to make it work. But more than that, it needs this the deposit banks, the money deposit banks, to implement the policy. You now wonder what happened all of a sudden to the ATMs. You now wonder why you cannot access new notes at the ATM, and you see videos of individuals throwing bales of this new money, new naira notes, at parties. And that tells you, is it that it is also impossible even for our security people to track these people, as these people abusing? A major source of concern for many of us, even before now, is that you don't get to see new notes anywhere in Nigeria. Before now. And all of a sudden we are changing to new notes, and it's as if that cabal, as it were, had also now captured these new notes.
Well, let's also take this opportunity to mention, in fairness to his point, that the Department of State Security, the DSS, has arrested more than one syndicate in more than one part of the country for exactly what we're talking about now, which is this kind of hoarding of the new Naira note, obviously in some level of collusion with the deposit money banks, which is why I was emphasizing in my point that yes, it is true that the Central Bank of Nigeria is not alone in this matter, but we also know that they are the only institution, the only body that has the power of sanction over the banks. And this is why we have to ensure that everybody is doing everything they can to ensure that these notes are made available to all citizens.
Okay, before we leave off of this, just two quick issues. Another side to it all. Yes, nothing wrong with going cashless. It's all about the world. But again, the question is, shouldn't you have infrastructure that can support this? In the last 2 weeks or so, the rate of failure of electronic transfers has been astronomical. In fact, there are people who have now said, don't do any transfers anymore. People have transferred over 48 hours. It hasn't gone through. Failure at point of sale, it's been happening. And to think that when you have this kind of situation, you're debited and the seller is not credited, you go to the banks, it takes you as long as 7 working days to have a reversal. Now, all that, isn't this causing a huge confusion?
It is. I agree with you, and that's my point of curiosity. Why now? We've had seamless, non-stressful processes of engaging and, of course, transacting digital and electronic transfers before now. I mean, there were times you just needed to walk to your ATM. Within 5-6 minutes, you have concluded. But all of a sudden, that changed when it was not supposed to change. All of a sudden, that changed when it was supposed to have, the capacity should have increased and be empowered and enhanced. So I believe that there's a need to investigate that process, even if it's just for us to understand crystallization of policies, the process of crystallization of policies. Because it is one thing to have a policy, it is another thing to have it implemented in the right form of way. This policy would have done this country a huge benefit if it had been implemented the proper way.
Right. So, Ajuri, what do you say to that?
Well, there's no question about the fact that our people have expressed a lot of dissatisfaction with their inability to access these new Naira notes. Even, like you mentioned, in the small figures we're talking about, 500 Naira, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000. So this is not about the transition to a digital cashless economy. This is about the basic fundamental of living up to a policy that we have put in place. And I believe that clearly with the new measures of oversight that Mr. President has approved through this extension exercise, that it will be conducted the way that it was originally intended to be conducted.
In fact, I have yet to see the new 200 Naira note.
Well, I've seen it.
I wonder if you have.
But what is clear is that the traditional orders of currency, new notes, are taking charge.
Right. Now, one final thing, and this goes back to the Act, the law establishing the Apex Bank, in which the legislature has drawn attention to, and that's the question of how long a currency remains
like a tender.
Yes. Yeah. And then after which the law actually permits that it can be returned to the bank. In this case, it doesn't seem like it's very clear that can happen. I mean, 10 days after the extension, people are thinking again that that's it.
7 days. By February
7 days after.
After, yes.
That's the window.
That could be extended.
Isn't this in conflict with the Act establishing?
It could be extended. The important thing, and I think the CBN is within its rights, to determine a cut-off date for the note for a currency to be a legal tender.
Okay, but not to be returned to the bank.
You can return.
Okay.
But from February 10, for instance, except there's another shift. But from February 10, the whole Naira notes, 200, 500, and 1,000, becomes no longer legal tender in the Nigerian economy.
Fine.
But after then, if you have a billion, if you have a trillion, you can still approach the central bank to deposit, but you cannot use it any longer.
About the billions. What if you have?
If you have 10,000 naira, it's the same thing.
You can. You can.
But
what I'm saying is, whatever you have,
I'd rather stay with the small figures because that's what the majority of the populace. That's what.
No, whatever you have, you can still drop in your account, but you cannot spend it. Right. That's the difference.
All right. So this extension, do you see it as being helpful in bringing respite to millions of Nigerians who are stressed out by this exercise?
There was a huge sigh of relief, really. There was a huge,
the proof is in the pudding.
Across the country, there was a huge sigh of relief when the extension was made. I think it was done in good faith.
Okay. All right. We have been looking at the extension, the deadline. And we have the main issue tonight, which is about the development of infrastructure, the investments in so many sectors of the economy and the impact so far. That's what we'll be talking about next. And we still do have two guests here, Ajuri Ngelale and Nia Kinshiju. But we also have some reports from some of our state's offices, and we'll start off by taking the very first tonight.
From the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway down to the rail corridor on same axis are touches of excellence targeted at upscaling the state of infrastructure. This effort seems to be deliberate, considering the huge contribution of Lagos to national economy. But for the ones completed, like the 156-kilometer Lagos-Ibadan standard gaugeway line, the testimonies keep reoccurring even after 2 years of inauguration by the president.
It has assisted a lot. It saves us from stress and traffic, and it's so convenient and comfortable.
The prospect of freighting cargoes along the corridor is promising, which will possibly reduce congestion at the Apapa ports.
The old good days of railway, moving containers, moving goods, moving farm produces, moving livestock is gradually getting back. Supply chain mechanism is being improved.
While the feasibility of this noble initiative depends largely on fully accessing the port through rail, the reconstruction of the Apapa-Oshodi-Oworo-Shoki Expressway is an alternative provided by the present administration for seamless cargo evacuation, and the solid concrete pavement road in the axis is easing the traffic and reducing travel time.
It's total for us, and everything is smoothly. We are going smoothly, no problem on the road.
Of topmost importance is the construction of a new terminal at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, expected to handle 14 million passengers per annum. The ultra-modern building, designed in line with global standard, is reducing passengers' waiting time. In fact, the construction is coming more than 40 years after the old terminal was built.
The environment is conducive. At least my kids can run up and down, place their hands on their floor, and I'm not scared. Or like the old terminal, like, oh, don't touch the floor, don't do this. But here it's looking good. So, and the customer care is very nice.
The excitement derived from the infrastructural development of President Muhammadu Buhari is endless, as the Deep Blue platform has not only pulled down maritime offenses on Nigerian waterways to zero, but there is a sense of ease from investors. Still basking in that euphoria, the maritime industry also witnessed the approval for the disbursement of the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund.
We are going to develop an action plan. The action plan will come with deliverables, timelines, key performance indicators, and other things like that.
The completion and inauguration of the Lekki Deep Sea Port, another joint venture of the present administration with the private sector, is a game changer.
We have a deep sea port that can take in the largest vessel in the world. Of course, it's really a game changer, and it's going to boost our economy even within the sub-region.
With this array of developmental projects, it is visible that President Muhammadu Buhari has changed the infrastructural narrative of the country than it met it more than 7 years ago.
All right, a report from Lagos. Our next report comes from Port Harcourt.
It has been said that Rivers State is among the most beneficial states with huge federal government investments in road infrastructure, port development, and oil and gas. This is because, apart from the about 200 billion naira investment in the Bodo-Boni Link Road, billions of naira is being invested in the East-West Road, the Port Harcourt refineries, and the seaports. While there is no much traffic in terms of activities at the Port Harcourt port, the Onne port is experiencing an increased economic activities due to the installation of modern cargo handling facilities, while the proposed Bonny Deep Sea Port is yet to kick off.
We expect that these three ports in the Niger Delta will be able to decongest the Lagos ports. Cargoes ought to move from Lagos seaports to Port Harcourt to at least to revitalize and encourage economic activities in these three ports.
Some proponents came up with a proposal to kick off the construction of Bonny Deep Sea Port. They have done the OBC and the FBC, which have been looked at. But what happened was that the initial location identified had to be changed because of existing pipelines.
The rehabilitation project at the Port Harcourt refinery is said to be in progress and will be of great support to the oil and gas sector. Similarly, the Bodo-Boni Link Road is presently at about 56% completion, with 11 out of the 13 bridges completed.
In the history of mankind, you can walk on your way between Bodo to Boni and it's almost done.
this place is going to open up.
That is the entry of Atlantic Ocean into the southeast. So the ships and everything come through there. Now that we can go by road, it will save a lot of costs.
However, the east-west road linking most of these projects is in a deplorable state. Although there was repair works at the Nkolu and Choba axis of the east-west road in Port Harcourt before the recent ravaging flood on the road. In Biama to Awoda and One axis are still calling for attention.
Now that the road have been moved to the Ministry of Works, we don't want any delay.
We have redesigned things, and then we are going to introduce flyovers around the LMA area to separate normal road users from the industrial cluster who are going to the refinery and the petrochemical plant.
It takes the expectations of all that the federal government will complete all these projects in record time.
All right, back here in the studio, we have Nia Kinshiju and Ajuri Ngilali. Let's start off with you. A fair assessment, under fair assessment, how would you rate the administration in terms of the provision of infrastructure so far?
Huge, impressive. And that, my submission actually has a context. The context is that these deliveries, have been done at a time of economic headwind, when we had revenue challenges. It would have been a normal delivering on the mandate of a government when you provide infrastructure. It's an actual. It's a definitive responsibility of government and governance. Build roads, provide armory, provide good health system and all that. But when you have a government that is constrained, a government that got into office and just some 1 or 2 quarters afterwards went into a recession, exited that recession, and when it was just about settling down, got into a pandemic that led into a recession. And the essential implication of a recession is that your cash flow is reduced, highly reduced. So when you now look back over the last 7 years and you see the kind of things the government had delivered, and these I have observed, every Nigerian, whatever he or she may have against the government, will say the government have done so much. But my contest is, I would have also dismissed that to say it is the responsibility of government to do so much.
Right.
But my contest is, we know there have been a lot of limitations, challenges in terms of revenue. And within that, the confines, the constriction of that revenue, the government has been able to deliver, on what we have not been able to do before.
All right, you just took it out of my mouth, because I was going to say, well, how do you respond to those who say, well, if the government has provided these infrastructure, it's what they campaigned with and said they would do and expected to do once been put in office.
But again, when you compare to other administrations too, that had so much to do, that had so much revenue, and you could not also relate by even counting by fingertips how many infrastructural facilities or projects were delivered.
All right, let's hear you, actually.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cyril. So I think my brother Ni has laid the groundwork in saying that, yes, President Muhammadu Buhari came into really, if you look cumulatively at it, it truly is the most crisis-ridden time, particularly in economic terms, in the history of our federation. Why do I say so? You had 2 economic recessions on the one hand, which he alluded to, but more than that, you had a once-in-a-century global pandemic, COVID-19, from which the world is yet to recover. Now exacerbated further by the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, energy crisis. We have inflation rising around the world, interest rates rising around the world, unemployment rising around the world, GDP growth plummeting around the world. My point in saying that is that it does not speak to the context enough to allude to only that. You also have to factor in the fact that between 2004 and 2015, an 11-year period, we were operating an excess crude account in this country. During the oil windfall years of previous administrations, you had 107 billion US dollars flood into that excess crude account from 2004 to 2015, 11 years. $107 billion. By the time Mr. President took office, 105 billion out of 107 billion had been spent with nothing to show for it. No physical infrastructure, no social investment programs, and all of that. In addition to the fact that you only have $2 billion in the excess crude account, which is really your primary buffer, the foreign reserves that had been built up to a point of about $60 billion or so had been spent down all the way to about $27, $28 billion when Mr. President took office. So you have almost barely 5 months of a buffer in the case of a global economic emergency. The point here is that in view of all of these challenges, President Muhammadu Buhari still, by just sheer dint of creative policy development and implementation, has been able to bring about such a robust set of infrastructural interventions, the likes of which, if you combine all previous administrations, civilian and military combined, they will still not measure up to what Mr. President has done in 7 years. And I'm being very empirical about what I'm saying. So let me be very specific. Before 2015, there was not a single functional standard gauge high-speed rail line in operation anywhere in our federation. Today, in 7 years, with all the conditions I've mentioned, half the revenues, half the time, all the crises, Mr. President has put 3 on the ground. We have the Abuja, Zaria, Kaduna high-speed rail line. We have the Lagos, Abeokuta, Ibadan high-speed rail line. We have the 326-kilometer Warri, Ajeokuta, Etakpe rail line. 3 of them. Not to talk of the reconstruction work we've done on the colonial era, old gauge rail lines. Now, in addition to that, when Mr. President took office, there was not a single, new international airport terminal in this country in 2015. Despite, like I said, all the windfall, all the years, double the time, double the resources, not a single one. Today in Nigeria, we have 5. We have the new Murtala Mohammed International Airport, which Mr. President placed into operation just last year. We have the new Port Harcourt International Airport, which Mr. President invested massively in to bring it to completion in 2018. We have the new Nnamdi Ezekwe International Airport in Abuja, which Mr. President commissioned in 2017. We have the new Aminu Kano International Airport in Kano, which is already open to traffic, is just yet to be formally commissioned. That will be done soon. And then, of course, we have the new Akano Ebiam International Airport in Enugu that Mr. President has invested tens of billions in, which is now just a few months away from final completion and commissioning. That is not even including the fact that we have built separate cargo agro-allied cargo terminals in all of these different international airport terminals. That just covers railway and aviation. If I begin to now talk about works, we'll talk about roads and bridges. It will take me some time to be able to do that. I'm sure we'll do that later in the program.
Again, yes, the government has done so much, but it has not been without the critics of the government alluding to the fact that yes, you can achieve so much, but some of these projects had been initiated before this administration. So,
Cyril, this is one of those arguments that really just it elicits just a shake of the head, because for how long will we be drawing projects on paper? For how long will we be talking about we will do this? This is what the same argument, the second Niger bridge, over 350 billion naira investment, the largest bridge investment done by any administration in over 30 years in the southeast, linking Anambra and Delta State. When we put it on ground, they said, it was Goodluck Jonathan that started it. Meanwhile, go and ask Julius Berger, the contractor. They will tell you who started it and who finished it. It was not Goodluck Jonathan. What they did was to go there, look at the traditional drawings, the same way that President Olusegun Obasanjo was infamous for going around the country with drawings on paper, say we're going to reconstruct a Enugu-Port Harcourt Expressway. Nothing. We're going to construct, we will do railway modernization plan with rail lines covering the country. Drawing. They didn't deliver any of it. So my point here, Cyril, is that anybody can say, I will, we will. The question is, what have you done? What did we do? And this is where we are. And fortunately, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, because he's a man of no propaganda, not too much talk, but a lot of action and a lot of deliverables, we can tell the Nigerian people across our beautiful country all the various interventions he made. And I want to be very specific about something. Let's take it region by region, just very quickly if we may, please. If you go to the southwest today, let's just talk about roads a little bit, the major ones. You have the Lagos-Shagamu-Ibadan Expressway, abandoned for essentially 40 years, almost since from the time that His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari was military head of state. Nobody had touched it. He's the president who has come in and not only reconstructed it, expanded it in some parts, and also added new interchanges to it. The Apapa axis that was just like a nightmare for Lagosians and for import-export business practitioners in our country for decades now, has now seen total reconstruction of the Apapa or Waronshoki Tollgate Road, expanded in some parts to 8 lanes and all of that using cement technology. Totally done, started and completed under this administration. If you look at the Oyo-Ogbomosho Road as part of the Ibadan or Ilorin Road, you will see the massive reconstruction that has gone on that road. Same thing that we're seeing on Lagos Badagry Expressway and many others in the southwest. Now, if you go to the southeast, we'd already mentioned the 350 billion naira Second Niger Bridge, which is good and important. But in addition to that, you have a total reconstruction of the dualized sections 1 through 4 of the Enugu-Port Harcourt Expressway, abandoned for 40 years. The Aba-Port Harcourt Expressway was literally just sheets of mud in 2015. I know because I almost died on that road in 2014. You will have tankers flipped on the side, just mud. There's not even any patch of cement anymore, gravel and all of that. Reconstructed to 8 lanes, Aba-Port Harcourt Expressway. If you go across this country, go to the North Central, where we have reconstructed the Ilorin-Jeba-Mokwa Road. Right now, we just awarded the dualization over 100 kilometers at over 125 billion naira. We have the second, it's 60 billion naira local Oweto Bridge, linking Benue and Nasarawa in the North Central there, cutting travel time from southeastern part of this country to the north by 5 hours with the provision of that one bridge done by President Muhammadu Buhari. If I go to the north very quickly, you have the Abuja-Kaduna-Zaria-Kano Expressway. You have the Kano-Katsina Expressway that we've been building over the last 6 years, cutting deep into the northwest. And then you have the Kano-Maiduguri Expressway cutting across the states of the northwest into the northeast. So across the country, you're seeing interregional linkages as part of the economic development blueprint brought by President Muhammadu Buhari.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Ajuri. Of course, like I said, 2 hours is not enough for you to make this presentation. But is it for me? What's even more impressive? It's not. Yes, it's good for business, enablement of business, enablement of movement, and all that, the infrastructure. But again, when you also now look at policies, especially as they crystallize, for instance, for the first time. In fact, for the first time, perhaps since 1972, since the since the oil boom, was first experienced, the total sum accumulated from export of non-oil products, had never been up to what was generated in 2022, $4.5 billion. For me, that's a major milestone. Because it has been a national aspiration for us to start diversifying away from concentration and dependency on the oil sector. And under a Buhari regime, constricted, challenged administration, we were able, to secure this. That for me, it's even bigger than infrastructure, because that's going to impact industries, across board. That is one. Then 2, in terms of processing, for a long time, the advocacy, anybody that wants to become popular in the public speaking area in Nigeria is to say, diversify, go to secondary processing and all that. Now, for the first time again in the history of this country, now this is history now, it's not even about 1970s, it's 1960, we are able to process our primary raw materials, to the tune of more than 68 billion naira. So from these are These are fundamental, profound movements away from where we are coming from. So where infrastructural delivery, are responsibilities of government, the creativity applied to economy, so much that we can start seeing results of diversification, are things that should be appreciated in the administration.
But explain to us the economics, if you will. You have all this on ground. Would you say this has transformed to a commensurate improvement in the standard of living of the ordinary citizen? That's on one hand. And how do you make such inroads and yet have a challenge with inflation and the high cost of living?
Don't forget that we live in a global world. That's the first thing. And of course, because we live in that global world, whatever happens outside there impacts us. We've talked about two recessions. Two recessions that were not tracked in any way to failure of policies within Nigeria. They were created outside, and we became sitting victims because we have not built a domesticated economy that we are just now building. Perhaps if we had had a domesticated economy, one that we don't depend on the vagaries, of crude oil price, we don't depend 90% on importation of all our manufacturing raw materials. We don't depend 80% on importing food. Perhaps we would not have been able to, this would not have impacted us so much. But what we can see here, one, because we are challenged, I like to put that as the context, because we are challenged, we are moving out of that challenge situation. So that going forward, when there is a crisis of this nature, in another 2 to 3, 4 years, we would have built, a protection wall, a protective wall around our economy. Now, we are seeing improvements in earnings from export of raw materials and, of course, processed goods. So we are not going to depend solely on earnings from crude oil and gas. That is one. Then two, we are seeing more earnings in terms of collection for FAC, Federal Account Allocation Committee. Every month now, we are seeing exponential increase, in money shared. For the first time in, I think, November earnings, the FAC shared close to $1 trillion naira, despite the constraints. Now, why we need to jubilate is that it's from FEC that about 27 states, would plan around the salaries of their workers, So if the economy was not properly managed and we're making that earnings, there would have been the challenge, of payment of salaries. Just as we had more than 27 states not being able to pay salaries and allowances, in 2015, because of a drastic fall. In the moment you had issues with crude oil earnings, it impacted on everybody. But now we are not talking about that. No state is talking about not being able to pay salaries. That's one. Then two, our number of poor people, despite the multidimensional poverty that is being bandied around, in terms of monetary poverty, that had been the major measure of poverty before now, that is the baseline, which is $1.9 you had lesser Nigerian people, out of that poverty circle. The other aspect of multidimensional poverty are not directly the responsibility of the federal government, but the monetary aspect of it, we are talking about less than 40%, and that is historical, because before now, in 2005, more than 63% of Nigerians were living in abject poverty. And that abject poverty is not multidimensional. It has to do with how much we spend on food and other expenses by the people, per annum. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, we are not there yet. Mm-hmm. We are challenged, but you can see a lot of movements.
Yes, yeah, Cyril. So I think it's extremely important. You know, in the responsibility I have as a senior special assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari, I pride myself on leveling with people. You know, when you look at, we talk a lot about other nations, right? We talk about China, India, the United States, and so many other, you know, fast developing countries and developed countries. And we look at where they are now without looking at the trajectory of how they got to where they got to. And if you look deeper into, in fact, I just had a conversation recently with President Muhammadu Buhari on this very thing, where we were discussing the fact that so many people have the expectation of a developed country without wanting to go through the processes that those countries went through. And so if you look deeply at you know, a country like China, where they spent, you know, 40 years moving from being primarily agrarian, heavily impoverished nation to being a heavily industrialized, you know, a nation with a lot, you know, with mass employment and fairly mass prosperity. It was a journey of a generation that really sacrificed for future generations, in the sense that when you have financial constraints like the constraints Nigeria presently has, and you know that you have massive infrastructural deficits due to decades of maladministration, which all Nigerians know is the case here, you have to apply as much of that resource as possible to basically digging yourself out of that deficit, which is what we're talking about with Mr. President. Now, as part of that process of putting the physical infrastructure, you asked a legitimate question about the living standard of a Nigerian citizen, right? There are a few things to unpack. First of all, it's appreciating the fact that in spite of all the challenges we've all talked about, and in view of all the investments on hard infrastructure, it's also pertinent to note that it was this president who put in place the social investment programs, which are currently impacting 14 million Nigerians whom had never seen a social investment program in the history of our country in terms of mass social security. You have 9 million school children on the homegrown school feeding program, which is employing hundreds of thousands of chefs and farmers who supply the eggs and all of the various ingredients. You have over 3 million petty traders across all states of the Federation benefiting directly from digital transfers and new capital to expand their micro enterprises. You have over 1 million young graduates who are gaining skills, technology, as well as capital to start their own enterprises after leaving the program. These are things that didn't exist before. If we had more resources, we would scale it up to 50 million. But right now, we could afford 14 million. But it is a starting point. Now, in addition to that, it was President Muhammadu Buhari. People often forget that before 2015, the notion of, if you are a business, if you have a you know, a micro or small enterprise, you know, and the notion of getting capital from a bank was something you can't even think of. If you go into a bank, they will, by the time they tell you about the collateral and about 24% interest rate, you just walk away knowing that you cannot meet the conditions and all of that. It had moved from that kind of a situation to one in which the Bank of Industry has now supplied over 1.2, this is separate from social investment, has applied over 1.2 trillion naira to over 1 million micro and small, medium scale enterprises across the country. We have the Anchor Borrowers Program, which provided over 1.3 trillion naira to over 3 million farmers, which is what is responsible for what my brother Neil was talking about, where we say, look, how did we get to a point where in 2015 we had economic crisis? We had a situation where the capital component of the federal budget was not even being funded just because oil revenues cut. Why was it? Was it magic that when President Muhammadu Buhari was in office, we had the pandemic, cut our federal revenues, our national revenues by 60%, yet we were still fully funding our budget? It was not magic. It was because Mr. President, with vision, looked ahead and said, look, we have to replace all this, foreign exchange expenditures on imported foods and all of that. We have to replace that with local production. The way we do that is by empowering our farmers to produce it locally so that we don't have to spend that foreign exchange and we can apply it to roads, railways, bridges, airports, seaports. My point in summation on this, Cyril, is that there's no magic wand. If you don't have the infrastructure in place, the roads, the superstructure, the bridges, the airports, the first new seaport in this country in over 40 years in Lekki that Mr. President just commissioned, if you don't have those things to facilitate import-export flows, then you are going to be in a situation where, as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is now in full implementation, all of the other countries we're competing with, the Moroccos, the Egypts, the Kenyas, the South Africas, the Ghanas, Cote d'Ivoire, and all these other countries that we're competing with that did not suffer 50, 60 years of fairly consistent maladministration and infrastructural decay. We are going to be behind when hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars worth of new investment floods into our continent. It will be going to these other countries, and Nigeria will just be the dumping ground. So if we make the investment in infrastructure so that the private sector, the foreign direct investors come in and they have the superstructure on which they can build their industries, establish their factories, massively employ Nigerians, because we know government cannot do it. Anywhere in the world, it is the private sector that does it, and we are enabling the private sector to do it. But it takes time.
All right. Well, at this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, the phone lines will be open. It means you can join in the conversation in the studio. And, of course, we do have some other reports, a couple more reports, which will be showing you. So stay with us on NTA Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly.
The 157-kilometer Lagos-Ibadan Railway is the first double-track standard gauge railway to be built in West Africa. The Mobolaji Johnson train station is a masterpiece, an infrastructure that is gradually becoming an iconic building in Lagos State. The modern facilities put the station on a world map of train stations. Likewise, other new train stations across the country built to world-class standards. The train and its convenience is indeed an admirable effort, with commendations from Nigerians.
This is a station that we have to commend the federal government for putting a beautiful face, empowering us in Lagos State, not only in economic and political arena.
I can say that I'm really impressed with the infrastructures in place. Kudos to the Minister of Transportation, kudos to the federal government.
Truly, good things are coming out of Nigeria, and the federal government is deserving of all the applause. NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. Well, this is the part of the program where you can join in the conversation. The phone lines will be on your screen. You can take advantage of those and call in. And we say this every Tuesday. If you're calling in tonight and your call gets through to the studio, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And we encourage you to go straight to the point. So many people waiting to get on the platform as well. Don't worry too much about the greetings. A simple hello, that's enough. So we encourage you to call in and be part of the conversation with a question or a comment. And our guests who are here will take on such issues as you might raise. We'll start off with this report from Enugu.
The transport sector, as one of the key drivers of any viable economy, has received tremendous attention in the President Muhammadu Buhari administration. Some of the major benefiting roads which still have works ongoing are the Enugu-Onitsha Express Road under the Infrastructure Development and Refurbishment Investment Tax Credit Scheme, the Enugu-Port Harcourt Expressway Section 3, and the old Enugu-Onitsha Road.
So I believe that the government of Muhammadu Buhari, in terms of infrastructure, can compare above average what we got from PDP. Because if you recall that the Southeast entirely has always been PDP, one would expect that within just the 4 years of an APC government, we need not be talking about the Enugu-Onitsha, Enugu-Port Harcourt Road. It ought to have been done.
Some completed interventions in federal establishments in the state include the rehabilitation of internal roads in the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and Enugu campuses, as well as the rehabilitation and construction of culverts at the Federal School of Dental Technology and Therapy, Enugu. These efforts are appreciated by the academic communities.
I'm exceedingly very happy with the
the road because like it gave the school a facelift.
Really, I want to say thank you to the federal government for what they have done.
In 2019, President Muhammadu Buhari personally commissioned the world-class CBN Postgraduate Center of Excellence at the Enugu campus of the University of Nigeria. This project, he said, underscores the federal government's commitment to providing the needed infrastructure for efficient learning at all levels of education. Also on the 30th of August 2020, the rehabilitated and upgraded Akanibiam International Airport Enugu was inaugurated, another project standing out to the credit of the President Muhammadu Buhari administration.
I wish to put on record profound gratitude of His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari for his unparalleled support and commitment to this historic and timely critical infrastructure upgrade. A clear testimony of determination to build a nation through the provision of critical infrastructure to stimulate economic growth and development of the Nigerian nation.
Considering the socio-economic impacts of these and other federal projects in Enugu State, the people appreciate the investments of the federal government in providing these life-changing infrastructure.
All right, we're back here in the studio, and we'll continue to look at some of the sectors and see just how much the interventions and the programs and projects of the current administration have impacted the lives of the people. We talked about industrialization, and a key driver of that is power. Now, a lot still needs to be done in power, and you find people say, well, we think by now we should be miles and miles away from the current situation where we're still grappling with failures, blackouts, and hardly enough power, which of course should drive the industries, increasing the cost of energy and raising the cost of goods. What's the response in that? How well have we done on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Cyril. So I think power, of course, is one in which you have to appreciate what we had to dig out of and then talk about what we've done since then, right? We had a privatization of that sector in 2013. Most Nigerians are aware under President Goodluck Jonathan's administration, privatization happened. Unfortunately, at that time, we had a situation, I'm going to tie it into what we're doing right now because it's very important to understand the background. Unfortunately, at that time, many of the private sector players that came in to bid for these assets around generation and of course distribution, transmission is still within the state control under the TCN. But many, particularly on the distribution subchain, you had a situation in which cronies of the previous government that handled the exercise essentially went to foreign banks, got hundreds of millions of dollars worth of loans to fill their balance sheets, their company balance sheets, to create an impression that they had more existing capital than they actually had, use those balance sheets to bid and then ultimately win these assets. As soon as they got these assets, they now pay back the loans. Now they don't have any capital to do what they promised to do, which was upgrade those assets that had been privatized. Now, as a result of that failure, and as a result of the fact that you had death pill provisions, we call them death pill provisions because they were built to really undermine future governments. Effectively, if you wanted to cancel or reverse some of these things, it would involve massive amounts of money needing to be paid out and all of that, really protecting the cronies of that administration. I say all of this to say that that created a scenario where distribution companies were in the hands of individuals who did not have the capital to build new substations, to basically make the efficiency and operationalization of those assets effective for the distribution of the power from the grid into the homes and businesses of Nigerians. So now government was now having to pay, through the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, NBET, was having to pay billions, I'm not talking millions of dollars, billions of dollars that we had to pay, the federal government, government had to pay power generation owners who were providing gas providing power to the grid that the distribution companies should have been paying for, but were not paying for because they weren't effectively wheeling it to the homes and businesses of Nigerians. So we were paying billions of dollars to generation companies, power generation companies, effectively for power that Nigerians were not enjoying because the distribution companies were failing in their responsibility. Now, where we are today is that we had worked assiduously to intervene in terms of providing a mass metering scheme, the metering asset program, in which we've been able to supply nearly 2 million meters across all states of the Federation to the various franchise customers across the privatized distribution companies. That's on the one hand, because it's only when a Nigerian has a meter that you can effectively gauge how much they should be paying for their electricity. That determines the money that will be paid to the distribution company, and that now determines how much money the distribution companies will have to be able to pay the generation companies and make their profits. Okay. My point is, I have to just finish this quickly, Cyril, is that what we've done is with the mass metering exercise and with the transition of new interim leadership in the distribution companies, we've been able to now phase out the federal government having to pay billions of dollars to the generation companies because of our innovations, because of our intervention over the last 6 years. Distribution companies are finally in a position to be paying the generation companies, taking government out of it. That's one thing that we've done. The second thing, very quickly, is on the power sector. We have been investing over $1 billion in the new 700 megawatt Zungero hydroelectric power project in Niger State. We're about 30 days from the official commissioning of that project. That's going to add a bulk quantum to the national grid. That's on one hand. There have been several other hydroelectric projects that are smaller. We have the Kashimbila project in Taraba, which is 40 megawatts. That's going to be added to the national grid. And then we have 10 megawatts coming from Dadinkowa hydroelectric project in Gombe. Then the final point on this is the Presidential Power Initiative, which is an innovation and a program brought by His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari. Really, we were able as a nation to leverage on the personal credibility of the president, so that when he went to meet with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, she was ready to work with us because Mr. President and his worldwide reputation for personal integrity, he basically said, look, let's do a nation-to-nation, government-to-government transaction, which cuts out all the consultants, all the middlemen, all the political actors that usually divert funds. Let's cut out all these people, and then let's ensure that we can pay you, with sovereign-backed guarantees in exchange for the distribution substations and power lines and all of the requisite equipments that will see Nigerian distribution capacity rise from the current 5,000 megawatts to 7,000 megawatts. This is what we've been able to do.
Right, let me ask you to pause here for a while. We have a caller on the line, Daniel, calling in from Lokoja. Hello, Daniel. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Good evening.
Yes.
My name is Mr. Daniel. I'm calling from Lokoja, Kogi State.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if it is President Buhari spokesperson. Is it a journal or what? The failure is one thing you can't hide. It's just like a pregnant lady. No matter how you hide your pregnancy, it will shoot out. Buhari has tried one side in terms of infrastructure and everything. But the amount of what this government did not do is more than what we have seen. You think President Bola Tinubu is stupid that he's not campaigning with what is happening in this administration? So let's call a spade a spade. That's all I want to say. Of Nigeria.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. May I respond to that? Yes, okay. Yeah, I think it's natural for me to respond to my dear brother and fellow compatriot Daniel from Lokoja because he cited His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Mr. President, and I happen to not just be the SSA to Mr. President on Public Affairs, but I also double as the Assistant Principal Spokesperson to the Tinubu Shetima Presidential Campaign Organization. So let me say very clearly, as somebody who is embedded in the campaign, that it is absolutely false and a wrong perception to suggest that His Excellency Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not campaigning on the landmark achievements of President Muhammadu Buhari across the sectors. In fact, I would tell you, if anyone has been watching the live rallies of His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, all you will hear from state to state are about the interventions of President Muhammadu Buhari across the sectors in those various states, and his assurance to the people of those states that he's going to build on the successful foundation laid by President Muhammadu Buhari. And I would go a step further to say that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is probably the most fortunate presidential candidate in the political history of civilian democracy in Nigeria, in the sense that he's the first presidential candidate of a major political platform that can actually point to tangible achievements across the sectors that Nigerians themselves can go and verify. Before now, presidential candidates of the major parties before President Muhammadu Buhari will be relying on jingle, will rely on slogan, oh, transformation agenda, breath of fresh air, oh, I didn't have school to go to primary school. They will say all of that because he could not tell you what President Obasanjo left behind. He will not tell you what railway was on ground, what airport was on ground. So they will make up slogans. We've moved from that to being able to go across this country and say, look, if we're in Kogi, where you are in Lokoja, we will tell the great people of Kogi State how Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari invested $2.8 billion in the Ajeokuta to Kaduna to Kano gas pipeline, which is going to generate billions of dollars in annual revenue in the future because of that investment made today. And Asiwaju is now saying that he's going to extend the AKK pipeline, for example, all the way up through Niger Republic into the Algerian pipeline system, so that for the first time in Nigerian history, we can be earning billions of dollars in new revenue from Western Europe by piping our gas all the way from the Niger Delta into Western Europe through the AKK that is in Kogi State, through, and all of that. That's not even talking about the Warri Ajeokuta Etakpe rail line, which this administration did, which Asiwaju has also campaigned on. So my point is that the idea that President Muhammadu Buhari has failed, or the idea that we have nothing to point at. In fact, it was even interestingly in that statement that he was even alluding to the fact that yes, Mr. President has tried in infrastructure. So why then would he say that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not proud to campaign on that platform? That is not true. Thank you very much.
So we can take this and extend it to the question of oil and gas. Nia Kishiju here, since he's just mentioned about the AKK project. Let's go oil and gas and see what has been done in that sector.
I think a profound achievement in that sector is the democratization of the production of, or rather, the refineries, refining capacity. We can't say self-assuredly now that Nigeria's refining capacity has increased and has potentials to increase more.
Right,
largely, we are coming from a 0 point.
Okay, largely due to private sector investment, but
it's because of that. It's because of a lack of private sector intervention that we found ourselves in this problem. In 2000, between 2004 and 2005, 18 modular refinery licenses were issued, and until the coming of Muhammadu Buhari, the current president, none was functional. By 2018, when a new set of licenses were issued, some of us that had been particular about that industry, because I follow the industry a lot, was like, will it be possible now? But what was obvious is that this administration had no personal entrenched interest in that segment, because that's what had been limiting realization of policies in that industry. So you now had a situation where another 12 licenses were issued. Out of those 12 licenses, now we now have 3 for the first time: DuPont, Edo, and Watersmith modular refineries now going into production. This is beside Dangote.
Right, let's just pause a while, and Johnson is calling in. Hello, Johnson. Johnson from Aba. Yes, Johnson, I can hear the hell back. Turn down the volume of your TV set. Please do that.
I've done that already.
Right, go ahead.
Yes, I want to commend the spokesperson of the president. I want to say that Mr. President is like 7-Up. The difference is clear. I have been around. I don't need any soothsayer to say that Mr. President has touched life. he has done what people have never seen in Nigeria. Look at what he did when the COVID-19 came. Nobody exported. We have what we call export grants that is happening right now. People I know in my neighborhood got 4 million, 10 million just for them to a tap on the back that you didn't do business during the COVID-19. The infrastructure is amazing. It is happening when the country don't have money to invest in infrastructure. I know when a barrel of oil was $150, Nigeria couldn't build one infrastructure from 1999 to 2015. How did this man do this? We need to commend this man. In fact, this is the only way a man can live forever, because his landmarks would outlive him. This man is amazing. I wish Nigerians would listen, appreciate this man when he's no more here. And he keeps saying it. He's not doing it for himself. He's doing it for Nigerians. He loves Nigeria from all his heart. It's amazing. I've not seen any president like President Muhammadu Buhari. I voted in 1999. I voted in 2007. I voted in 2023. Passionately in 2011, we voted a Southerner. I'm from Niger State. We voted a Southerner, Goodluck Jonathan. He had to insert a belly in his name. He had to insert a Azikiwe in his name just to get our votes. He said in 2015 he will commission the second Niger Bridge. He said in 2015 he will commission the Enugu-Port Harcourt Expressway. I have to sound like, because I live in the southeast. 6 years down the line, he prepared national budget for 5 times. He couldn't address it. I was standing on a podium in Dananyam Stadium in 2016. When he came, I was ashamed. He said he built a mortuary at Federal Medical Center. He brought UNIN, Kanuma boys from this state. What is all that? So I had to try something different. When President Muhammadu Buhari met, I was accepted that podium in Dananyam Stadium. Rota Sokorota named them Senator Gige. I was there. Mr. President said 3 things: security, infrastructure, and economy. And he asked me again, has he done that? He has done that. That is why I call him 7-Up. The difference is clear. He will live forever. Mr. President will live forever. Thank you very much, sir.
Right. Thank you, Johnson from Aba. All right. Back here in the studio, yes, you were just about concluding the matter of oil and gas, which will also refer to Ajuri Ngilali as we go on.
Yeah, so I am projecting that in the next 24 months, Nigeria will be the major hub of oil refinery in Africa, you know, especially if you look at 445,000 barrels federal government owned refineries, 650,000 barrels Dangote refineries, about a total of 60,000 refining capacity in the modular sector. It's streamed now, you know, and of course going forward, it's not just about PMS alone. It is about creating a whole industry of petrochemical.
Right. Yeah. But how does that? Well, we can't run away from the use of petrol and the never-ending crisis in the downstream.
Right.
How does that reflect on that?
Well, I think it's important for us to be very, very specific when we talk about what the state of affairs is in the oil and gas sector, and I'm going to just take a moment to do that. Yes, I've already alluded a little bit to gas in terms of gas transmission, but it's one thing to be able to move gas from A to Z. It's another thing, and I'm going to get to oil in a moment, it's another thing to expand your production capacity of that same gas. What, Mr. President, and my brother Nee alluded to this earlier in the conversation, the fact that we have gone from looking at how we're going to simply exploit raw materials and how we're going to actually add value to those and export it at the highest value possible for the sake of the Nigerian revenues and the Nigerian economy. Now, what we have under President Muhammadu Buhari is a nearly $12 billion investment in NLNG Train 7, which is already at about, I believe, 50 or 55% completion. This is going to add 1/3 of our current total gas production in the country, adding 1/3 of that total to the current total. So that's massive. On the other hand, there have been massive investments in the transportation pipelines. Yes, I talked about $2.8 billion for the AKK. That's going to obviously massively industrialize the north, because now the northern industries, whether it's textiles, pharmaceuticals, plastics production, you name it, they're going to have direct access to a gas line on which they can build their industries. But aside from that, he has almost unspoken. He had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in the dualization of the Escravos to Lagos gas pipeline system, which is known as the ELPS2. The first Escravos to Lagos line was done in 1989. We have been able to now dualize that, doubling the amount of gas moving from the Niger Delta into the southwest, with major economic ramification in terms of providing double the amount of energy to southwestern industry, which we all know is very key when you talk about Lagos and Ogun State and all of that. But aside from that, you have a new OB3 pipeline, which is going to be feeding the AKK, which has basically doubled the capacity of gas coming from the Niger Delta that is going to be feeding the AKK. Now that more or less deals with gas. But the last point on gas is that we've also gone into processing. Mr. President, under his leadership, invested 200 million, NNPC, under the President's leadership rather, invested $200 million in the new Oredo gas processing facility in Edo State, which again deals with the production of LPG, and we have LPG production plants going on. I think the largest in Africa is under construction right now in Lagos State, being done by the NNPC. There's a lot going on across the value chain. Now to crude, which is what you asked about. On the crude question, it's all well known that before now, when we talk about refinery turnaround, maintenance, refinery reconstruction, and all of that, these were multi-billion-dollar contracts that previous presidents, some of whom criticized this president on the economy, ironically, they were issuing billion-dollar contracts to turn around refineries that they weren't even turning around. They would just take the money and fund political parties. What we have done since then is Mr. President has invested over 1.9 billion, or 1.5 billion rather, in the reconstruction of the Port Harcourt refinery. Okay, you have a question.
Yes, let's just
no
hold it
problem.
there for a while.
No problem.
Yusuf calling in from Lagos. Hello, Yusuf.
Hello.
Yusuf.
How are you? Well done.
Yusuf.
How's everything?
Yusuf, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm listening to your program.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, we thank God. Yeah, please, I'd like to ask two questions from Mr. Ajuri. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead with the question. You're listening to yourself. The volume of your TV is on. So just ask your question.
Okay. I said, what's wrong with our refinery that we cannot do anything since 8 years ago now?
Okay, that's one. What's the second question?
And the second question is that Mr. Ajuri, is he from Nigeria? Is he a Nigerian?
Okay, fantastic. Well, he heard you.
I love my brother Yusuf. Thank you very much. Let me start with the second question first. I believe my community people can tell you where I'm from. I am from Ekporo town of LMA local government area of River State. My father served in the River State House of Assembly. He served as a minister of the Federal Republic. My name is very well established in River State, and I'm a proud Nigerian. That's first. Second of all, if you ask the question about the refineries, interestingly, that's actually where I was about to go. First of all, there are two things to unpack when we talk about the refining question. One is, it's really important to me that we put to bed this question of, because we're an oil producing country, the pump price should be cheap. There's a general perception that if our refineries work, and I've dealt with this, responding to millions of Nigerians on radio. The idea that many Nigerians have today is that if we have our refineries working, pump price will be cheap. Okay, I want to put that to bed by saying that there's no country in the world, especially oil-producing countries, whether they're prosperous oil-producing countries like Saudi Arabia or less prosperous oil-producing countries like Angola and many others. that have cheap fuel despite having refining capacity, because refiners do not build refineries as a move of charity. They build refineries to make money. So what happens, what you save, the benefit of Nigeria having a working refinery in country is that we will be saving hundreds of millions of dollars on logistics and transportation fees on the refined PMS that we're bringing into the country from international refineries, not to speak of the payments made to those international refineries to get the product. That's what we're saving money on. So the benefit of having local refining is not to have cheap fuel at the pump. That is not how it works. The benefit, just to be clear with everybody, is to make sure that we maximize Nigerian revenues and we cut unnecessary wastages and wrong expenditures. Now, with that said, on the refinery question, it was President Muhammadu Buhari that has invested over $1.5 billion in the Port Harcourt refinery reconstruction. This is not like they used to do in those days when it was just a president bringing a contractor, any indigenous contractor, and all of that, give them all the money up front and they will say it's maintenance or reconstruction. No, what we did was we intentionally involved an international third party, a well-respected and credible international bank known as the Afrexim Bank, that approved a business case, that approved the internationally respected contractor that we brought, which is Tecnimont SPA of Italy, who has constructed refineries across four different continents already. They were, once Afrexim Bank saw the contractor we were using and knew we were serious, they approved the business case and approved the co-financing that they brought for us to reconstruct Port Harcourt refinery, meaning that we have a contractor that's legitimate and meaning that we have the money needed to execute the reconstruction. And I'm proud to report to you tonight, my brother Yusuf, that as of March, that is within the next 60 days, Mr. President will be commissioning phase 1 of the Port Harcourt refinery, meaning that we will have 60,000 barrels per day of refined PMS coming out of that refinery for the first time in over 30 years, with phase 2 being done by December 2023. That's just one out of the 3 refineries. Well, I'll tell you more after this question.
Right. We have Hussaini on the line from Jos. Hello.
Hello.
Go right ahead, Hussaini.
Yes. Mr. Kajiru, Mr. President tried in the area of infrastructure. There is no doubt about that. But all your social intervention programs, there are problems. And I will tell you why. You are dealing with the theoretical aspect of it in Aso Rock. But the reason is that the people there, the money, the billions, the millions of dollars, billions you are counting is not getting to the right people that you are talking about. I come from the southern part of Plateau. Carry out your research. Anchor borrowers, everybody knows the southern part of Plateau are predominant farmers. The yam, the rice, and most of those products you are seeing in Lagos come from southern part of Plateau, extended to Taraba and Benue State. But I'm telling you, all those anchor borrowers' money that we are giving, it end up in the hands of those people that are living in just not part of flats in the town, that are selling goro and other petty things. And the real farmers are there. They don't give them. How do you expect Nigerians to get food sufficient? That is number one. Number two, the issue of electricity. You're talking about electricity debt everywhere. These people cannot recover the money they invested. Let me tell you, there are places in this country that you cannot go there and touch their power, even with prepaid meter that you people install. And it's a vast area in this country. If you go there as a NEPA staff to climb, you will see that they've disconnected the prepaid meter. They are using a direct connection. And if you go there, they will tell you that their religion, you cannot climb up there to touch their thing. Even here in Jos, there are areas that you cannot go and disconnect the light. There are some people that take the connection. So a lot of the power being sent into the central district for distribution, it goes on into the hands of people that are using without paying. And you are telling Nigerians every day that they don't pay money for power, they don't do this thing. They know it. They know their brothers who doesn't pay. It's because you are still in Abuja. Can't have research. The vast majority of notes, they don't pay bills. They don't. And nobody entered their compound to cut the light. They will harass you if they don't even kill you. So that is where we are having problems. Let us decentralize this power system. Let every state maintain our own power, maintain everything, and you will see the difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Husseini.
Yes. Yeah, he asked quite a number of. I'll just try to unpack as much as I can.
Now, first, he started off with the social intervention program.
Yes, he did.
About the anchor borrowers.
Yes, he did. So, just very quickly on those, it's extremely important for everyone to recognize that the social investment programs were not conducted in such a manner that somebody is sitting in an air-conditioned office in Abuja with no understanding of what is happening on the ground. That is simply not how that program is administered, and I want to be very clear about how we're doing it. We have brought co-financing from the World Bank. How we achieved that co-financing is that the World Bank officials come into the country. They are part and parcel of the cash distribution process with the conditional cash transfer program. They are part and parcel of even the process of identification of those beneficiaries across the various communities, across the wards of the local government areas of this country. So there is a process in which we partner with the World Bank to go to the ground with the World Bank. The second part, which is a legitimate concern, is the issue of corruption and diversion on the part of perhaps some bad eggs that we may have in the system, in the ministry, or in the social investment office. These are things that are absolutely, we will not deny that we've had instances of that, which is why Mr. President, in his wisdom, granted the ICPC the responsibility of oversight and monitoring of all of the various component programs of the social investment scheme in the country. So we have a hotline where our people in the communities, whether rural centers, rural communities or urban centers, that they can call toll-free to report any kind of malfeasance. And as a result of that, I can report to you authoritatively that we have arrested over 100 different officials over the course of the last several months in view of some attempt to illicitly divert resources, cash in particular, that was devoted to particular beneficiaries. And the reason why we were able to do that was not just because we put the ICPC on the case, but because of the technical processes laid out to ensure that the cash gets to the right beneficiary after we had identified the beneficiaries. We can know whether they got the money or not because there's a feedback mechanism that we put in place and a monitoring mechanism that we put in place. So these are all things that once you understand the way the program is structured, you will know that yes, there may be bad eggs, but those bad eggs are apprehended, they're arrested, and they're taken out of the scheme. And then we ensure that wherever there was diversion, we also meet those community members and ensure that their money gets to them. So this is the process that we've put in place.
Benedict from Adama is calling in. Hello, Benedict.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, go ahead.
Okay, please, I want to commend this administration for the good work they have done. We are aware that this country is almost failing to the point that some states could not even pay salaries. This government came in and gave us bailouts, and we have improved so much on our infrastructure. The only thing we can do is to pray for Mr. President. So he has left a very good legacy, and pray that whoever is coming should continue from that trajectory. He really saved Nigeria. Only God knows what would have happened before 2015. You know, we can only pray for him. He really did well. All these criticism, they are mostly sabotage, and because they have control of the economy. Before the last administration left, they handed over most of the assets to some of their friends.
All right, Benedict, thank you very much. Thank you, Benedict. Well, we'll return to the studio, and let's quickly move on to another sector. We're trying to pack in as much as we can on this program, and this is critical. And health. You talk about health today, and perhaps the single parameter with which you judge the health system is there's an exodus of medical personnel to other parts of the country, and Nigerians still engage massively in medical tourism.
That's true. But again, it's an historical deficiency. There had been a gap, and to a large extent, I see the gap being filled consciously. The last one, Reddington Hospital, I think that was where the vice president.
I think it was. It's Reddington owned, but it was the. The name is escaping me.
Escaping me, but
they can Google it though.
It's Reddington Hospital. It is a globally competitive hospital established, I think, 2 years ago in Lagos, financed by the central bank, and that's just one of about 10 of such hospitals, financed by the central bank. Now, what that tells us is that there's a paradigm shift away from encouraging, on creating that environment for medical tourism. There's a deliberate enhancement of hospitals around. Cancer specialist center of excellence, where cancer is being treated now. We have about 10 of such in Nigeria. And again, there's also that emphasis on primary health care. At the last count, too, about 8,000 primary health care centers are being, constructed around the country. And to my mind, that is not even within the purview of federal government. It's an intervention by the federal government. It's supposed to be the responsibility of local governments and at the most state governments. So there is a consciousness by the Buhari administration, to deliver for the common people, as it were. And that is why you see that effort at the level of the primary health centers. I also heard that the primary health centers are so equipped now, especially those near urban centers and all that there's a preference for people to even go there than the sentiments of you have headache approaching tertiary institutions, tertiary health institutions unlike those days. So I think to a large extent, the little resources that had been plowed back into the system, especially to encourage health, is a foundation, for what would come thereafter. I am hoping and I'm praying that whoever succeeds Mr. President, would have the consciousness, would have empathy for the Nigerian people as this president has. Because whatever he has done, it is because he wanted to deliver for Nigerians. There are enough excuses for him not to deliver. But the fact that he is doing so much, and we are saying it, we are itemizing what he has done, given this condition that he met the government, the economy and the government as it were, I think we should congratulate the president for what he has done.
Well, still a bit on health, and questions have been raised about why medical personnel would still be trooping out to other parts of the world if the health system within the country had been adequate, and the loss of highly trained personnel to other parts of the world further creates a deficit.
There's no question about it, Cyril. We have to come to terms with the reality of our country that what is required now is more than just new projects in these sectors. What we are now facing is the need to have a fundamental rethink around the superstructure on which those sectors are built. What do I mean by that? In addition to what my brother Nii said, it's important to recognize that yes, President Muhammadu Buhari has put in place the new African Medical Center of Excellence, a $300 million mega hospital that is being executed in collaboration with the Afrexim Bank. That is going to be the first medical center of excellence, I believe, on the continent. Should be one of the core legacies in terms of inhibiting the flow of medical tourists from our country to other countries, and really starting the flow of medical tourists from other countries into our country for our benefit. Now, when I say a fundamental rethink, when we talk about a doctor's exodus and all of that, if you look around the world today, I'm sure you would have read the news probably within the last 2 weeks, where you had tens of thousands, not 10 or 100, tens of thousands of doctors in the United Kingdom leaving the United Kingdom for other countries. What you're having is a situation where a lot of these countries and the public health systems of these countries are being affected by the global economic conditions that are leading to revenue shortfalls. Because when you have revenue shortfalls, that affects everything from the quality of the infrastructure to the quality of even employee remediation, what you're paying your staff and all of that. All of that becomes affected, and that now has its own impact on worker enthusiasm and all of that. But back to the Nigerian issue. In this country today, we're in a situation where we like to have things cheaply, right? So we want government to subsidize petroleum price. We want cheap fuel. We want government to step in and subsidize healthcare costs. We want cheap healthcare costs. We want government to come in and subsidize education costs so we can have cheap tuition. So when you have that desire, right, or that appetite for cheap things that are not priced to an internationally competitive pricing regime, what ends up happening is that you cannot give what you don't have. So if you're paying, if you look at, for example, you go to a hospital in Benin, or Benin in Edo, not Benin Republic, or you go to a hospital in Port Harcourt to maybe have appendicitis surgery or something like that, you find out that you are paying literally 15% or 10% of what people will pay for the same procedure in Ghana. Not that Ghana has better expertise, not that they even have much better infrastructure, but just because they're paying the right price. The implication of that is the Ghanaian medical system is able to effectively pay their doctors and their nurses internationally competitive salaries so that they don't want to leave. But right now we have a situation where everything is subsidized, everything is cut cheap, so that by the time we now have to pay our doctors, pay our nurses, where's the money coming from? Because everything is a cheap service. Well, this is the rethink that His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is also looking at in collaboration with current incumbent medical officials.
Now this aspect I left for the last, because this probably is the most talked about issue in Nigeria today. Security, and every other thing would pale in the face of insecurity. You have good roads, you have health facilities, you have good education, but if your life is not secure, nothing happens.
Yeah, at a point in time in the life of a nation, things happen. It just happened that over the last 10, 11 years thereabouts, we had a security situation. Unfortunately, when the monster was evolving, we had a state that was not prepared, either in terms of armed personnel or in terms of armory capacity. Those were our situation was vulnerable, So by the time, and we thank God, we should thank God that we have a President Muhammadu Buhari coming to office at that time. It was that by 2015 we've always talked about 17 local governments under control of bandits and rebels, and again we had started seeing indication of banditry in the northwestern parts of the country. The evolution of this monster, it's principally because the state was incapacitated. So much that despite the funds made available to acquire and enhance armory capacity, was even frittered away by corrupt officials. I mean, that had been an issue in the public space. But now, I take it's a thing of pride for me, to look at how the president had empowered the Nigerian armed forces, either in terms of platforms acquisition and of course in terms of training capacity too. The last I heard about naval capacity is that we moved from 30 platforms. And when I'm talking about 30 platforms, I'm talking about vessels and warships, to 552 platforms by November 2022. So much that now we are even building our own warships in country. The same thing with the Nigerian Air Force. We moved from about 10 to about 90, inclusive of the world-class Tucano, You know, that it's some African countries don't even imagine that in a country like Nigeria could acquire that. And of course, we have seen the impact. And then, of course, going forward, the last time there was any form of recruitment in the police force, you know, was I think 2002 or 2003. You know, but now since 2017, every year, 10,000 new recruits of policemen.
Actually, were Nigerians expecting too much that the general, as commander-in-chief, would have put down an insurgency and secured the country in 7 years?
Absolutely not. They were not expecting too much at all. That is the foundational basis of the social contract between government and the people, that you'll secure the society, that you'll create the enabling environment in which they can freely and peacefully do their business and conduct themselves along with their fellow citizens. So, no, to answer your question. But I want to move on to the issue of insecurity, because we have to look at it in two different ways. On the one hand, the deliverables in terms of the outcomes out in the field, and then on the other hand, alluding to some of what my brother mentioned in terms of the massive armament and improvement of our capacity to deal with security threats. Let's start from where we were. In 2015, and you know, I think we have this tendency to falter into short memory in our public analysis of this issue, because people forget how bad it was. In 2015, I remember I was a reporter then in Abuja here. I was covering these bombings in Abuja. You know, you had this day bombing, you had the UN house bombing, you had market bombings, church bombings, bus stop bombings. I mean, it was just all over the place. When you were leaving your house in the morning as a reporter, you didn't know if you were going to come back in one piece or not. That's how bad it got. So that's one thing. On the other hand, you had bombings across the country. Every week in the newsroom, you will get a new report. A bomb goes off in Kano Market or Kano Mosque. Bomb goes off in Kaduna Market, Kaduna Mosque. The frequency was every 10 days, literally. That's where we were in 2014, 2015. That is not the situation today. When Mr. President took office in 2015, from the time he has taken office in 2015 till today, not a single bomb has gone off in Abuja. The bombings around the country, we barely see them. The Northeast, where 1/3 was under the terrorist occupation, administration of lands, even collecting taxes, running parallel government, ISWAP and Boko Haram and all of that. Today in Nigeria, the entire leadership cadre, the hierarchy of ISWAP has been decimated. Abu Musab al-Banawi of ISWAP has been assassinated and taken off of the field. Abubakar Shekau of the original Boko Haram fashion has been assassinated and taken off of the field. They've been decimated. 90% of those who had been run out of their communities into IDP camps have been resettled back into their communities that have been reconstructed. All the emirs across the north that had their palaces destroyed and they were being assassinated from guys shooting from bikes and all of that, they have been restored back onto their thrones in reconstructed palaces. Airspaces that were closed for 2-3 years in Maiduguri have opened up in Yobe and many others, Adamawa and the like. Across the northwest, where we had massive banditry attacks, we are seeing a drastic reduction in casualties across the northwest, where we used to wake up, you see 73 people killed last night in Zamfara, 70 people killed in Sokoto. You're not seeing those figures anymore because of the brave work of our gallant armed forces in the northwest. And then in the north central, you recall in the last 4 years, where we had massive casualties almost on a daily basis from these farmers-herdsmen clashes. Today, you're not seeing those casualties in that zone. It's not by accident, it's by the work of the armed forces under our commander-in-chief. My point is that it is not yet a finished work. It is a work in progress. But nobody can question the fact that from where we were in 2015 on the insecurity question, across the country, across the theaters, to where we are now, where all of our territory has been reclaimed, where most of these threats have been killed, they would give Mr. President a pass mark, even if we all agree that there's more work to be done. And on the last point, very quickly, Cyril, on the issue of the massive armament, people forget that in the 1970s, when Mr. President was the Federal Commissioner of Petroleum Resources, we had a Defense Industries Corporation of Nigeria, DICON, that was functioning. We were producing our own small arms. We were producing our own, uniforms, equipment, carriers, and all of these things. All of a sudden, over a 40-year period of administrative laziness and neglect, like everything else, infrastructure and all the things that we've already talked about,
DICON was left to basically die. We now moved to massive importing, even our military uniforms, we were importing them, not to talk of arms and all these things. Mr. President has invested massively since 2015 in the resuscitation of DICON. Today, we're proud to report after 7 years and all the other investments we've already talked about. Today, we are now manufacturing our own light arms again. We are manufacturing in Kaduna our own unmanned aerial vehicles, our own drones in Kaduna. We are manufacturing our own armored personnel carriers in Ogun State in collaboration with Proforce. We are manufacturing our own mine-resistant ambush-protecting vehicles, MRAPs, across the country. And I've not even talked about the Air Force and in the Navy, new landing ship tanks. We have new armored attack vessels on the marine coasts and all of that. In the Air Force, we have dozens of new attack helicopters from around the world. New assault drones, Wing-Lung series drones from China. These are some of the drones that they're using in Turkey and in the Middle East. These developed economies we're talking about. They're using these equipments that President Muhammadu Buhari is just struggling to put resources together to be able to get these things done. My point is that whether it is the results, the outcomes in the field, you will see the evident improvement. Nigerians have recognized that. But in terms of how we got there, it is not by magic wand. It was because Mr. President did what previous leaders failed to do by equipping our armed forces and ensuring that our armed forces are of a quality that is competitive with any armed forces on the African continent.
Well, we've spent some time talking about what this administration has been able to do. And as I usually say, no one program can take on all the issues. So we must leave this conversation at this point and thank our guests who have been here. Julie Ngelale, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Right. And Nia Kishiju, Financial Investment Analyst, we'd like to thank you once more for being part of it.
It's a privilege. Thanks so much.
Right. For those who called in, thank you for being part of this program. I assure you that next week we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Continue to stay safe.